What is going on? I'm Darkside Phil, and welcome to another edition of the Hateful Truth video game review series, where I give you maximum truth and minimum bullshit regarding my personal experiences with today's latest video game releases. And the game that we're going to discuss in this particular review is a game that pretty much was never going to be made, or fans had kind of given up hope that it ever would be made. A game 8 years in the making, that actually shifted over from its original development studio to a new one, and people kind of wanted to see, gee, I wonder what this installment of the series is going to be like. Will it be true to the older games? Will it have some new things mixed in, especially because there's a new development studio? What is this going to turn into? And the game we're talking about today is Sly Cooper, Thieves in Time, and or Sly 4, basically. It is the fourth installment in this ongoing classic platforming series. Okay, so Sly Cooper, Thieves in Time. The last installment of Sly Cooper that we saw was 8 years ago. And after that, Sucker Punch Studios, who had been working on the games, decided to move on to other things. And as we've seen over the past several years, games like, Infamous, they definitely moved on to bigger and better things. But there was a fan base, a very dedicated, hardcore fan base, that had been built up for the Sly series up to that point, being that there were 3 installments all on the PlayStation. Or PlayStation 2, I guess I should say. And so they were kind of disappointed that the studio had moved on to other projects. Well, last year we saw the release of Sly Collection, which was a collection of the first 3 Sly Cooper games remade in HD for the PlayStation 3. And with the announcement of that release came the announcement that there was a new studio called Zanzaru Games, and Zanzaru Games had ported those games to work as this HD collection. Well, due to the success of that collection, Zanzaru Games, I guess, talked to Sucker Punch, and the agreement was made that Zanzaru would be trusted with actually making the next official installment in the series. So, lo and behold, 8 years later, we get Sly Cooper 4. Now, let's talk a little bit about the game. I know a lot of people are going to say, gee, I wonder what it's like. Is it like the old games? Is it different? Did it change? What's the deal here? The bottom line about Sly Cooper 4, the whole game kind of feels like fan service to people who are fans of the original 3 games. Now, I'm very pleased that I actually played the original 3 games over the past year, because if I didn't, I wouldn't have understood the comparison to this game. But basically, Sly Cooper Thieves in Time is literally like an homage to the original 3 games. The gameplay is almost identical. And so let's talk a little bit about this. First of all, the plot. The plot of Sly Cooper 4, Sly comes out of retirement. The pages of the Thievius Raccoonus, which is the book that taught him all of his thieving powers, that was written by all of his ancestors who were previous thieves, world-renowned thieves, the pages are disappearing. And Bentley, who is the technological genius of the group, determines that it must be something to do with time travel. Someone's gone back in time and is actually changing history so that basically Sly's family history is disappearing. Their reputation is being destroyed. And so Bentley creates a time machine. The crew goes back in time to different locations to try to figure out what exactly is going on. That's the gist of Sly Cooper 4. And over the course of the game, you're going to jump to 5 different time locations, including prehistoric times, medieval times, Arabia. So those are just a few. But in each time period, Sly's goal is, number 1, trying to find out what's going on in this time period, who's there that's messing around with the time stream, and number 2, to find his ancestor in that time period, who is probably a famous thief from that time, and find out what happened, why they didn't write down their stuff in the Thievius Raccoonus. In some cases, it's because the history was changing, that person actually went to jail, or maybe that person got burnt out and they just stopped thieving for whatever reason. And so it's Sly's job to go to each time to recruit that ancestor from that time, to get them back into their thieving ways, and then to basically stop whatever's going on that was changing history. So that's the premise of the game. The gameplay of the game is ridiculously similar to previous Sly games, and when I say it's kind of like fan service, I really mean it, because a lot of your favorite characters from the previous Sly games show up again here. The gameplay itself is almost spot-on identical to previous Sly games. I would say starting with Sly 2, not Sly 1, which was more of a straightforward platformer. Every location is going to have an open world where you can explore openly. There are collectibles in this open world, and in this game, they not only do they bring back the collectibles, which were removed from Sly 3, they add new ones. So you have the bottles, which were such a big part of the collecting of Sly 1 and 2 are back. You've got masks, which are basically Sly Cooper emblems, which as you collect them, actually allow you to unlock certain things like skins. You can actually have different skins for your characters, or makes your parachute look a different color or something like that. And then there's the treasures, which you can grab, and you have to run back to your hideout within a certain amount of time with them to get credit for them. You've got your very classic Sly Cooper sneaking gameplay, where you're going to have guards patrolling these open worlds, and it's your job not to alert them, and to try to maybe pickpocket them and get loot off of them, which is worth valuable amounts of money. You then go back to your hideout, and you can buy upgrades for all of your crew at the hideout. Similarly to previous Sly games, now it's not just about Sly. You've got 3 members of your crew. Later on, Carmelita Fox actually joins you. And then, of course, you've got your ancestor from each time period who will join you. And each character has their own specific missions based off of their abilities. You know, Bentley has his hacking ability, and therefore there's not 1, but 3 different kinds of hacking mini-games in this game, including the classic top-down ones from previous Slys. You also have a side-scrolling shoot-'em-up or shmup style mini-game. And then, oddly enough, there are actually mini-games in this game that are using the 6-axis control of the PlayStation 3 controller, which really kind of confused me, but kind of blew my mind at the same time. No games have used 6-axis in, like, literally 4 years. I mean, the last game I think I can even remember that used 6-axis was, like, Uncharted 1, and that was for balancing on beams, and everyone hated it, and they took it out of later Uncharted games. So the fact that 6-axis was back kind of confused me, but I guess it is a little bit cool that someone finally used it after so long, and it's not implemented for extended amounts of time. It's only for very short minigames, so it actually makes it kind of bearable, okay? Now, your goal is going to be completing a series of missions throughout these open world maps with your different characters, and again, just like previous Sly games, it's going to sometimes switch between characters. Maybe you'll start one mission as Sly and you'll do one portion, but then it'll switch over to the Murray, and then Murray will have to do something. And your characters are all pretty much true to themselves. Murray is the bruiser. He's got better combat abilities. Bentley is more of a tactical guy who can shoot people from afar, but also is good at hacking. Sly is the sneak. He can sneak around with lots of stealth and maneuverability. And then, of course, you've got your ancestors who all have their own unique abilities as well, some of which are combat-based, some are climbing, some are like scaling poles. Everyone has a different ability that's unique to the character. So ideally what you're going to do is you're going to go throughout the stage collecting items, you know, collectibles, but also going through the missions, and then finally they're going to go to a final caper on each stage where there's a boss who's a boss character who doesn't belong in this time period, and it's your job to defeat whatever scam it is that they're working and basically kick their ass in a boss fight and then move on to the next time period. And it's pretty much wash, rinse, repeat for the entire game until you get to the final epilogue stage where you have a final showdown with the actual final boss, and that's it. Now I have a couple things to say, things that I like about the game and things that I think unfortunately were a little bit disappointing. What I liked is that Sanzaru took up the reins of an existing franchise that had a lot of fans behind it and they really did a good job of trying to stay true to the roots of the series. There's no crazy deviation from the Sly formula. If you're a fan of the Sly Cooper games up to this point, you're going to enjoy Sly 4. Especially because, like I said, it's fan service. There's a lot of cool references to the previous games. You're going to enjoy it, and you're going to like the fact that, oh, they got the voice actors back from the previous games. It is a direct continuation of the previous games. The gameplay is pretty much very similar and or spot on, okay? So in that regard, it's great. The graphics. The graphics are interesting to me because a lot of people seem to have had a negative response to the graphics, saying they don't like what they've done with them. So basically what they did with the graphics, unlike the HD collection that came out last year, which was basically just try to slap on a couple cel-shaded HD textures on these guys, they redesigned the character models of everyone in the game. And so you're going to notice things that you never saw in previous Sly games. So for example, Bentley, who's a turtle, isn't just pure green anymore. He actually has spots on him, okay? Sly actually has details so you can actually see like hair around his body. Murray looks like way more realistic than he previously did. And not to say that the game doesn't have a cartoony look, because it does, but they definitely added a lot of detail to the graphics, and I think for some people who had 3 games on the PlayStation 2 that didn't have that kind of detail, it could be kind of alarming or shocking that it looks different. But for me, I actually liked the HD remake, or not, the HD facelift, let's put it that way. I actually think it looked really sharp. Some of the things that I really don't like about the game. Number one, even though it's great that they stuck to the formula, they really stuck to it too much, in my opinion. I think Sanzaru was a little bit afraid to step outside the mold, similarly to how last year the new studio who tackled Halo 4 kind of made a game that was extremely similar to previous Halos, except for a couple tweaks in the multiplayer. I think that they played it a little bit too safe. If they had added maybe a couple new characters to the gang, or maybe a new kind of minigame or a new kind of ability, really the only new stuff in here are obviously your ancestors, who there's 1 per chapter, but really, when it comes down to it, you only play with the ancestor once or twice per chapter, and then there's an epilogue where you play as all of them once. So you really don't get to play with them too much. And really, the only real new minigames that I really can remember are that Bentley now has 3 ways to hack instead of 1. So outside of that, it was pretty much the same exact kind of gameplay from the previous 2 games, where you're just going to open world, sneaking around, stealing loot, buying upgrades, going to the missions, do some mini mission or mini game, and then do a boss fight. And it was like wash, rinse, repeat. It's the classic Sly formula, but in this day and age, 8 years later, I'm not sure that that stands up to what people expect from a modern game, okay? In addition to that, there were a couple times when the frame rate did chop up. It wasn't common, but there were a couple times when it was a little bit annoying when you're trying to run from something or there's a lot of action going on and you have a hard time trying to complete the sequence because the frame rate's chopping up. And I do have to say, the controls, although they are probably almost perfect, do have a couple issues. There were a couple situations where you were trying to do platforming jumps, and because of the camera angle, it was hard to figure out where to land. There were a couple times when I definitely jumped and pressed the circle button, which you're supposed to allow you to land on stuff, and I would just pass right through the platform. So it was a tad bit wonky. But the positives that I can say for that is the checkpoint system in the game is excellent. There was never really a point in the game where I was so angry because I had to replay a whole 5-minute sequence because I failed at something. In fact, the checkpoints were done very well, and I think that's a very positive thing to say about the game, and Sanzaru doing a good job of the game, of making the game. Another very positive thing to say is the length of the game. 5 chapters plus a prologue and an epilogue. You're probably, if you don't do the side content, meaning the gathering of items, you'll probably get about 10 to 12 hours of gameplay out of the game. If you do actually go for the collection, you're going to get way more. And there are a lot of optional trophies based off of collecting these items and doing these things that you're going to have an incentive to go back and replay it, just like previous Sly games. The price point on the game is great. The game's only $39.99 in the United States. I'm sure it's a discounted rate internationally as well. So the fact that you're going to get a lot of gameplay out of the game, okay, for only $40 is a massive plus. In addition, this game is a cross-buy, meaning if you own the PS Vita, you can actually port this game to your Vita, and it has a cross-save capability, meaning if you play, oh, I beat a chapter on the Vita, save up, plug your Vita into your PlayStation, and you can port that save in, and now you can continue the story from there. So it's actually a game you're buying for 2 consoles for only $40. There is supposedly a feature with the Vita that if you hold it up to the screen, similar to how you would do with like the Wii U gamepad, that on the world map it'll help you see the collectibles and treasures. That's all well and good, and a couple people asked me to do it, but really I didn't even have enough motivation to charge my Vita to do it. Like, it just seems like a weak gimmick to try to get people, again, to jump on their Vitas or buy the Vitas, you know, and it really doesn't, I don't think that would add anything to the game. If anything, I think that would hurt the game, because a big part of the Sly gameplay is the collection of these collectibles, and being able to see them easily on the world map kind of takes away some of the challenge. So in that regard, I didn't even attempt that gameplay because I didn't think that it was going to be something that I would enjoy. The ending of the game is a major point of contention because it is a cliffhanger ending. And I actually found out after I beat the game that if you could do all the collectibles, like if you 100% the game and get every single trophy, you get an additional 20-second clip at the end of the game after you beat it, showing a little bit more of the cliffhanger ending. But first of all, I don't think the game should have had a cliffhanger ending. I mean, it's nice that it did, and what they're basically trying to say is, hey, if this game sells well, we're definitely going to make another version of it, another installment, and then this is the continuation of the story. But what I think it's a bad idea is because what if this game doesn't sell well? Well, even though it's $40, what if people just are burnt out on this formula of Sly, you know? It really does play exactly like the previous Sly game. So what if people are like, you know, we've moved on from then. The days of platformers like this are done. So if the game doesn't sell well, now you're left with a cliffhanger ending and no definitive ending to the story of Sly, which is kind of annoying because the game did have a definitive ending at the end of Part 3, which they kind of wrote out of the story so that they could make a 4th installment. So I think that really is a valid point of contention. If you're a Sly fan, you may be a little bit pissed off at a cliffhanger ending, especially if it doesn't sell well and then you end up never getting a resolution to your story. Pretty annoying. So overall, what do I think of Sly 4? Let me put it this way. I think the graphics are great, the gameplay's pretty solid and similar to previous Sly games. Fan service with the regards of getting the same voice actors, continuing the story, bringing back the collectibles that were taken out of Sly 3, which I think a lot of people were upset about. They liked the collectible aspect. There's a lot of things about the game that are really solid, okay? Oh, the one last thing that I forgot to mention, Sly does get new abilities in this game. He actually gets suits that give him abilities, like he can have an archery suit so he can shoot arrows that create platforms. He has a suit that lets him pounce on things. But ultimately, these suits don't really get used that much. They maybe get used for 1 or 2 missions, and then they kind of get forgotten, with the exception of maybe the arrow, where if you go back to your previous locations, you can use them to get far off, previously unreachable collectibles. But really, the suits are just kind of a gimmick that don't feel like they're a solid addition to the series, and I would be surprised if we see the suits return if there's another installment of the series. So, again, fan service and homage to the classic Sly games, but it doesn't really deviate too much from the Sly formula. I don't really feel like they did anything to bring the Sly games to the modern era. I mean, an 8-year hiatus is something to be said. 8 years, you would think that maybe they could have thought something up that would have been really like, wow, this is cool, adding this to the Sly universe, and really you don't get that feeling with Sly Cooper 4. You feel like, okay, return to the roots, more of the same, but if you weren't a fan of that, and if you're really not into platformers, there's nothing that's going to attract you to this game. And another thing that may be confusing is it's not really a good jumping on point. There are actually things that happen in this game that are directly a result of things that happened in the previous game. And I'll be honest, I'm happy that my fans told me to play Sly 3 before Sly 4 came out, because there were a couple critical plot twists and things that happened in this game that I never would have understood if I didn't play Sly 3. So if you didn't play Sly 3, you may not even get the plot of this game. So, it is what it is. It's a unique mix of positives and negatives. For Sly fans, this is obviously a must-buy. Only $40 and or whatever the discounted price is in your region for a game that's going to give you a lot of gameplay. It's the return to classic Sly roots with an HD twist and some new characters. It's fun, but it really doesn't do anything for me like to bring me into the modern era. I didn't ever really feel blown away, and there were a couple, like I said, wonky things with the platforming that annoyed me a little bit, and I don't know, it just didn't feel like a great game to me. It felt like, okay, it's good, but it's more of the same, and they really needed to do something to revive the series. I'm not sure that selling the game at a $40 price point is enough to revive the whole series. For longtime fans, absolutely, but I don't know if Sly's going to get another outing after this game, to be completely honest. So, all things considered, if you're a fan of Sly, you're going to want to play Sly 4. If you're not a fan of Sly, I don't know. I guess it really depends on, do you like platformers or not? If you like platformers, you might like it, you might not. It is kind of very 8 years ago when it comes down to it. And all things considered, weighing the quality of the game, the length of the game, and everything, I'm going to give Sly Cooper Thieves in Time a 7.25. I know some people are going to be like, oh, that's too low. Some people might be like, well, it's too high. But that's my honest feeling. It is a good game. It's way better than average. It's not a 5, but it's definitely not great. It's not something like, I don't feel like they put the extra effort in, that they took it to the next level, that they found something new that they could add to the game that was going to push it into the modern era. It really feels like an antiquated 8-year-old platformer when you play it. And therefore, it's good. It's a great value at $40. It's a good bang for your buck, but probably only for people who were fans of the series to begin with. For people who weren't, I think it's going to be a hard sell, especially with where games have gone, more action-based these past few years, not having a lot of new stuff that's been added to it. I think that a lot of people are going to be just ignore the game and say it's not that good of a game or it's not something that interests them. and they're just going to pass. So Sly 4, a 7.25, a great game for Sly fans, but for everyone else, you may just want to pass it up. Alright, so that's my feelings on Sly 4. I hope you enjoyed the review. I hope it's informative. Now you know whether or not you should check out this game. I hope I gave you maximum truth and minimum bullshit from my personal experience, especially because I played the other 3 Sly games in the past year. I tried to give you some perspective there. Thanks a lot for joining me here on the Hateful Truth video game review series. I will see you next time. Peace out.